Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back. My name is Caster Seda, and today I am going to be casting a game between ROC and SK Gaming. This game was played on February 22nd and was set up by the EU LCS, so a big thanks to Riot Games for keeping this VOD online for amateur casters like me to get an opportunity to take a look at and practice my casting. If you'd like to take a look at the original VOD, it's casted by Joe Miller and Quickshot. The link is in the description, so please head on down there and click that and give them some support. But we are already in the picks and ban phases, so I'll just jump right on in. So far, it's pretty standard bans out of ROC so far. We do have Annie being banned away from N-Rated and Renekton being banned away from Freddy122. Of course, N-Rated was one of the first Annie players that I know of to really popularize support mobility boots Annie with distortion for that maximum stun, Tibber stun sort of lockdown onto ROC, and that could really work out in SK's favor if they manage to get something like that off. But of course, that Annie is banned away, so there's no surprise there. Renekton being banned away from Freddy, and on the other hand, SK, they've banned away Kassadin from Overpow. Now, we do know that Overpow does occasionally like to play those sort of weirder picks in the mid lane, such as Gragas and Pantheon, and I'll have to actually check my notes to see what else he does play, but he is known for those sort of unconventional mids. But I guess that Kassadin is more of just a safe ban from SK because Kassadin is just so very, very strong. And regardless of how he does, he can really sort of snowball rather well. So let us take a look. Yeah, Overpow is comfortable on Pantheon, Riven, Gragas. He has been playing a lot of those. Vayne being banned away from Candy Panda. Candy Panda's Vayne is certainly not something to be trifled with. Of course, though, Vayne is sort of a late game carry, so it's a bit surprising to see that banned away. And whoa, this is interesting. Xaxus hovering over Kayle. Kayle made it through the ban phase, so too did Yasuo, so Jessits could pick up Yasuo to deal with that Kayle, though Kayle is considered a counter to Yasuo because Last Breath's damage is delayed, and if Last Breath is activated, the target can be intervened upon by Kayle, which really denies a lot of the damage that Yasuo can do and follow up on, and effectively makes him dive into a team to do no damage, and then he's forced to walk away. On the other hand, Svenskeren was hovering over jungle Elise and is now hovering over jungle Pantheon. I don't know how Svenskeren does on Pantheon, but of course Elise is currently one of the strongest junglers in the game currently. So there's no surprise there to see that Pantheon hover, that Elise hover over. But with Elise open, that is most certainly going to go to Jankos. Jankos pretty solid on Elise. He has also played Evelynn and Lee Sin and even Mordekaiser in the jungle, so I wouldn't be surprised to see something entirely new out of ROC, as they are used to doing those sort of wonky sort of team compositions, but instead looks like he is going to be hovering over Elise. So not too much of a surprise there. Freddy locking in Lucian for Candy Panda. Lucian is very aggressive in lane, and this could really work out for Candy Panda and N-Rated if SK is going for an early aggressive strategy. And with Pantheon locked in as well, it seems like that could definitely work out for them. The sort of idea that you want to go for in lane is get Lucian and a very aggressive support such as Annie or Leona even, and Thresh, which it looks like Overpower is going to lock in for Vander. If you can get that really aggressive bottom lane, shove it as hard as you can while Pantheon rushes through the jungle to get level 6, and then Pantheon immediately goes for a gank bot once he gets his Grand Skyfall, and try to rotate towards a very quick dragon. And SK, they are very fond of their objectives. I know they are a little bit more classical in that sense, that they do try to take objectives rather than force team fights or force a longer laning phase. Actually, I believe they are more of a fan of lane phase. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just going to keep on talking. But yeah, with Vander locked in on Thresh, I do know that Vander, very good Thresh player. He plays almost exclusively Thresh whenever he can and does enormous amounts of utility to his team. So it'll be a bit curious to see what happens. And ooh, this is a very interesting. Calaver and Vander hovering over Ashe and Tristana. Now this is a bit weird. If that is going to be an Ashe and a Tristana locked in, that is likely going to be Tristana going AP in the mid lane, Vander going AD in the bottom lane, and Xaxus taking Kayle in the top lane. but it looks like it is going to be switched around just a bit as ROC has just thrown me for a loop. Instead, they're going to back off and go for something a little bit more standard. So ROC, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go for something funky, but I'm just curious to see what they are going to end up locking in. And yes, it is going to be Ezreal and Jax. Now, with Calaver on Ezreal, I feel like this is a very safe pick. The Ezreal has a very safe laning phase with his Mystic Shot, which means that he can keep his distance from the pressure that Leona and Lucian are going to put out. And even if Candy Panda manages to land a Zenith Blade, Calaver can Arcane Shift away the moment the Zenith Blade is done. So even if Candy Panda lands the Shield of Daybreak and gets the stun, Arcane Shift can still flash Calaver away without really putting his flash on cooldown. Vander in the top, Xaxis in the top lane is going to be going on Jax. Jax is a little bit more of a late game carry, so that means that Enrated is going to have to lock in someone who can keep up with him in the mid game and then scale well into the late game as well to really keep up with him. As Jax, once he gets his Grandmaster's Might, is just a little bit difficult to deal with, and SK Gaming locking in an Aatrox. Now, this is a bit interesting. The last time I saw an Aatrox in the top lane, it was entirely unsuccessful. Aatrox, he's not been very popular in Season 4, so I'm a bit curious to see what Freddy has up his sleeve, as he is going to be laning against a Jax. Aatrox excels in that he can harass rather easily, and once he finishes his Blade of the Ruined King, he essentially has infinite sustain with his Blades of Torment, and I believe it's the Blood Price, which allows him to regenerate a lot of health on every third auto attack. Only downside is, this means that Freddy is going to have to be up and close to the minions all of the time, and that's something that Jax wants, especially if he's going for a Triforce first, which I don't think we're going to see as he is landing against an Aatrox. I would expect a Bilgewater Cutlass opening in order to keep up with Aatrox's regeneration and harass. But once Jax gets level 6, he's going to throw down Grandmaster's Might, drop an Empowered Smite, Empowered Strike, and try to bully Aatrox out of lane, which is rather difficult, but it's something that he's really going to have to do, as Aatrox, once he completes his Blade of the Ruined King, he can sort of opt for one of two builds. He can go for a tanky Aatrox, pick up a Sunfire, Randuin's, Spirit Visage, that sort of thing, and just dive into the enemy team fight, soak as much damage and regenerate as much as possible to essentially provide a distraction for the AD carries on ROC, for I forget his name, Jankos on mid lane. So, Overpow in mid lane on Kale. And I think that could work. Not Jankos, Aatrox. This is SK Gaming. Oh, you know the one I'm talking about. Ziggs, that's the guy. With Ziggs in that mid lane. So, it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to go for in terms of item builds. I also expect if he does decide to go for more of a burst nuki build, we could definitely see his Static Shiv, as that is something that works rather well on Aatrox, as Dark Flight is considered movement, and using that immediately after landing an auto attack can charge it up quite a bit and get him closer to that second Static Shiv proc, especially with the Blade of the Ruined King for bonus attack speed, every attack giving him 10 stacks on his Static Shiv. So that could work out really well, but it looks like we're having a pretty standard opening so far now that we are in the game. Xaxis opting for the Crystalline Flask, which I think is rather safe against Aatrox. He wants to try to get a lot of health regeneration. The Crystalline Flask providing 100 health per charge, along with what appears to be 3 health potions on top of that. So he is just going to be focused on staying in lane for as long as possible. And that's just Xaxis playing it safe, wants to take his time and get nice and farmed and keep up with Freddy, who's going to try to bully him out of lane. So I think that will be our highlighted matchup for this particular game, as Aatrox, it's really something you don't see very often. It's very interesting to see an Aatrox in the Season 4 LCS. I'm a bit curious to see how they're going to play this out once we do get to the teamfight phase. I'm sure SK has something up their sleeve, but I don't know what it is quite yet. And yeah, we have a defensive line from both of our two teams, ROC and SK. They just want to play it safe, take their time in the jungle, and just really sort of play it safe. With Freddy starting at his, with Svenskeren starting at his red buff, that does mean that he is going to head down to blue second. Jankos also starting at the red buff heading to blue second. That's a bit indicative of their ganking patterns, as Svenskeren could rotate down towards bottom for a quick gank and try to punish Calaver and Vander. I don't know that that's going to be too successful, as Calaver on Ezreal isn't going to have too much trouble escaping from an early level 1 gank, especially if Vander manages to land a hook onto Svenskeren. And Jankos, though, starting off at the red buff, I think that is rather clever, as that does mean that he is going to be able to rotate towards top early on, which is something that he really has to be able to do. It's up to Xaxis to pressure Freddy early on to keep him locked down while Jankos clears through the jungle and tries to punish that early Aatrox. Because if the Bloodwell passive is popped on Aatrox, that means he cannot dive anymore, and that's really where Aatrox gets most of his strength. He's able to really quickly and easily punish very, very early plays with his Dark Flight and Blades of Torment. And we can see he's actually already starting to pressure Xaxis back. If we take a look on the minimap, we can see that he is ahead just a little bit in farm. And with that really, really early aggression, he's trying to take an early advantage. But here comes Jankos for a gank. Freddy, no problem. Dropped a nice early ward, feels safe, has no problem farming and backing away. He does have 1 tick in each of his skills, so he has his Dark Flight and Blades of Torment, which means that he does have mobility and slow. Xaxis, on the other hand, doesn't quite have as much mobility early on, so if the waves do push back, Svenskeren could come for a gank, but I don't think that's going to happen. Freddy's sole purpose in this top lane is to shove so hard that Jankos has nothing to do but spend his time in that top lane, dealing with that early Aatrox. If Jankos is spotted in that top lane, that means Candy Panda and N-Rated can shove super hard in the bottom lane. They're going to have no problem trying to outfarm Calaver and Vander. Of course, the early levels are going to go to Vander just because Thresh has a little bit more utility early on, but as it gets closer and closer to level 4, 5, and 6, I feel like SK is going to have the advantage, as we see Vander getting engaged upon. N-Rated trading very favorably with Vander. He does throw down the Dark Passage to absorb just a little bit, but he's taking quite a bit of poke off of this as well, so we can't really punish them for that. And of course, if Jankos continues to gank in the top lane, that means Jesset's can shove in the mid. Now, with a Kayle Ziggs matchup, normally I would say that is a fairly even, as they both have exceptional lane clear, but Kayle usually does just a little bit better, just because she doesn't have to worry too much about mana. Jesset's, whoa, lands a good satchel charge over Pow, throws a bit of healing onto himself, takes a bit of damage, but Jankos with the counter gank catches Svenskeren, is able to punish him just a bit. Nice patient play out of Jankos, waiting for that eventual gank to happen, but actually this is now Jesset's with an advantage in the lane, and now that Jankos is forced to camp up a little bit while Overpow heals, Jesset's is going to have a bit of an advantage, especially now that farm is going over to Jankos. This means Jesset's is backing off, and the early lane advantage is going to Jesset's, which is something that you definitely want on Ziggs. He should have about enough mana for a Chalice of Harmony, which means that Jesset's will be able to shove that mid lane rather hard, and I expect to see him continue to do that in just a moment. In the bot lane, however, it is still fairly even, currently 32 farm on Candy Panda to the 41 for Calaver. So Calaver doing very well so far, currently at a 6 farm lead, especially now that that minion wave is cleared. It doesn't look too disparate, but that's not that much of a problem for Candy Panda, as he is not exactly going for a sort of farming style. He wants to get his core items and then try to chunk Ezreal down with a Trinity Force, or possibly even go for a Bloodthirster if he wants to shove objectives, but I would be very surprised to see that happen. Usually with Lucians in a very aggressive lane where they are paired with someone such as a Leona, you would see a quick Sheen pickup, because that Sheen procs with his double tap passive, and that is an enormous amount of burst damage that is really hard to trade with. In the top lane, Freddy is continuing to shove onto Xaxis, and Xaxis, he's having a bit of trouble now. We can see he's at 39 farm, now at 40 to the 52 of Freddy. And Freddy definitely has the early advantage. He can shove this wave very, very hard. He can push Xaxis back to the turret. And as long as he delays that late game duelist Jax, that's going to work out in SK's favor. And Jankos actually now rotating up towards a gank. Freddy is rather far forward. He does have his blood well. There goes the leap. Dark Flight goes down. It looks like Freddy is going to be able to escape from this one. Cocoon misses in the bush. This is going to be Freddy just casually walking away from that one. Jankos not even landing the volatile Spiderling, as Jankos did use Venomous Bite on another smaller minion to pick that up. But now that Jankos is shoving in this top lane with Zazas, this is exactly what SK wants, as this means that Jessits can shove in the mid lane. We see he has picked up a Chalice of Harmony. Candy Panda and N-Rated can shove in the bottom lane, and Svenskeren, seeing Jankos in that top lane, can go for a really fast invade. Is going to catch Overpow. Mega Inferno Bomb goes down. There's a huge intervention blocking most of the damage. Satchel Charge from Jessits to try to catch up, but he doesn't make it in time, and Overpow makes it out of there. This is now Svenskeren shoving onto the blue buff. He's going to try to take it as quickly as possible, but Jankos is on his way. He has to know that something is up, and it looks like Svenskeren is going to be able to take it. He does have Smite. Yes, a successful invade from SK. While they weren't able to get the kill onto Overpow, this means that they were able to go down. A huge Zenith Blade from N-Rated, manages to catch Vander, but they both make it under the turret. N-Rated is now getting low. Ignite is burning away. First blood goes to Kelever. Candy Panda taking just a bit of damage from that turret with the gank from Svenskeren. A huge play out of Svenskeren, going for the red invade instead of walking out of the jungle. Uses the Grand Skyfall for the invade. I haven't seen something like that happen before, and really it worked out rather well, even though first blood did go to Kelever. And that's just Kelever flexing his muscles as Ezreal, showing us what it really means to be a powerful Ezreal player. And wow, this is such an amazing play out of Freddy. So very smart. Realizing that they did go for the red invade, he just decides to drop a ward at the red buff to catch Jankos in the act of stealing it, just to keep an eye for Svenskeren, so Svenskeren can decide whether or not, should I go over to my red buff? Do I need to contest that? Or should I rather just head to another minion camp and not even worry about farm? In the top lane, it is still going heavily in Freddy's favor. We can see a Bilgewater Cutlass has been picked up on both Zazas and Freddy. That is going to benefit Freddy a little bit more as he does, Zazas a little bit more, as he doesn't have that much health regeneration to begin with. So that will allow him to keep up with the pressure that Freddy is going to be putting in that lane, and really allow him to sustain a little bit longer and try to catch up with Freddy. Freddy is continuing to shove away onto Zazas, and it's not working out too well for him. We can see he does have an early farm advantage, about 21 farm ahead right now, but Zazas isn't as far behind as I'd like to see him. N-Rated catches Vander. Solar Flare doing a lot of damage. There is no level 6 on Vander, so he doesn't have the box quite yet. The culling goes down. Kelever body blocking for Vander. Candy Panda actually taking a few hits. True Shot Barrage comes out on the Candy Panda. He barriers a little bit too late. Is forced to flash away. Here comes N-Rated. Forced to Zenith Blade into Kelever to try to force the kill. A huge Eclipse almost catches him, but Jankos with the counter gank picks up the kill. But oh no, here comes Jessits. Actually, no, that's Overpow rotating down as Svenskeren was in position for a Grand Skyfall, but he is going to be walking on top of a ward, so he will be spotted. In the meanwhile, Jessits shoving away in the mid lane, trying to take this mid turret, and we can see Overpow getting punished just a bit, but there's not enough damage on Jessits quite yet. He does have a Fiendish Codex for cooldown reduction and additional damage, but it is not going to be that helpful. I would like to see the Athene's Unholy Grail finished before we start to really see Jessit's damage spike upwards. And this early team composition out of SK isn't working too well in their favor. Freddy shoving away at Jax in the top lane. He certainly is delaying that super powerful Jax late game, but he's not being as successful as I would like. Jankos going onto Dragon. Mega Inferno Bomb goes down. Svenskeren with Grand Skyfall managing to catch Jessits in the act, and there's actually going to be SK picking up the Dragon. A huge Grand Skyfall. Overpow gets caught by Candy Panda as well. He dies to a great Mega Inferno Bomb scout from Jessits to catch that Dragon in the act. Unfortunately, Jankos didn't get his smite timing quite right, and he went down, and the Dragon went over to SK. I was just about to say that SK's early team composition isn't working out as well as I would like, but it is actually starting to work in their favor. As we can see, they did take the first objective away from ROC with their early game power, and in the bottom lane, it looks like Candy Panda doing a bit better than Kelever in farm. He is currently even 1-0-1 to 1-0-1. 12 farm in favor of Candy Panda, and with that Dragon pickup as well, I do expect to see a completed Bloodthirster on Candy Panda, whereas Kelever is going to have to wait just a little bit longer before he completes his. But as I was saying in that top lane, Freddy, his sole purpose was to bully Xaxus out of lane. And now that Xaxus has picked up a chain vest in addition to the Bilgewater Cutlass, he can trade with Freddy rather favorably. We can see he's already starting to catch up in farm, only 16 farm behind right now. And Freddy is forced to pick up a few health pots, even getting a Giant's Belt before completing his Blade of the Ruined King. So this means that he has to worry about Xaxus, who's now starting to scale into Jax's super powerful late game. And we can see Xaxus has no problem. Freddy even throwing down the Massacre forces Dark Flight out of Freddy. He doesn't want to pop that Bloodwell passive quite yet. I'm not quite sure why, as it does mean that he would force Xaxus back, but Xaxus is just starting to do really well. A very patient play out of Xaxus, waiting out the early laning phase and building to counter his opponent, not building to straight rush that late game, which is where Jax wants to be. But whoa, Ignite actually even being dropped onto Freddy to deny additional health regeneration. I'd really like to have seen that Ignite dropped after the Bloodwell passive was popped. So let's see if Xaxus wants to try to force a fight, but no, Svenskeren is in position if there is going to be a gank, and Xaxus backs away. But with that early game going to Freddy, it's a bit unfortunate that Xaxus is not able to, that Freddy wasn't able to effectively lane out Xaxus. And I guess at this level of play, that's something that shouldn't be entirely unexpected, as this is the highest level of play. It is very, very high skill between most of these two players, between most of the players in this game. And it really does work out in ROC's favor. The longer the game goes on, the stronger Jax is going to get. Whereas Aatrox, on the other hand, he's going to start tapering off after about 20-25 minutes. He's really at his damage spike right now, as he is level 10. Once he gets his level 11 ultimate, the level 2 Massacre, he's going to be able to team fight very, very well. And I expect that to be when SK starts to rotating down, start trying to shove turrets, but instead they're just content to farm away to try to have a superior laning phase to ROC. And I guess that's what the whole team composition was sort of based around, as Freddy on Aatrox, definitely a more potent lane opponent than Xaxus' Jax. And whoa, another invade out of Svenskeren. This is the second successful evade from SK. ROC having a bit of trouble dealing with these invades, as they don't quite have complete ward coverage over the entrance to the jungle. Jankos going for a bit of a counter invade as well. He's going to drop a ward, but he's walking on top of a pink, so he is spotted, as this means he is going to have to back away. And Rated coming around from behind. Let's see if the Zenith Blade is going to land as Svenskeren comes in, lands a good stun. Repel goes down. Jankos is forced to drop away. A huge intervention gets dropped, but Jankos casually just going to walk away from this one. But now that Overpow's intervention is dropped, this does mean that Jessit, with his completed Athene's Unholy Grail and soon to be blue buff, is going to have no problem shoving Overpow out of lane. Mega Inferno Bomb being dropped to push the minion wave. That's an enormous amount of damage. And now that that cooldown reduction is active, Jessit, we can see his mana bar just climbing so very quickly. Is going to have a lot of fun shoving on that Ziggs. I know personally that I do really enjoy shoving with Ziggs. He just has such excellent wave clear. Throw down a bouncing bomb and then either a satchel charge or a minefield to shove that away and be really successful. But, so I was talking a bit about the laning phase for SK. They do have a superior laning phase, as Freddy, he did win the early game on Aatrox. Jessit's about even with Overpow. We can see he's currently at 171 farm to 125, so that is going to be Jessit's taking the advantage in farm. I do have to give Jessit's props there. Grand Skyfall going down into the bottom lane. Looks like there is going to be a gank as Calaver gets Arcane shifted, goes down to the culling from Candy Panda, who barriers a few turret hits. Vander is not able to land the Dark Passage and save his poor AD carry, as SK with yet another successful gank. And with Dragon about to spawn in 45 seconds, taking this turret is a huge objective for SK. If they can gain control over this half of the map, this will leave them free to take the Dragon when it respawns, and Jankos just doesn't have the wave clear to help defend this turret. It falls. This is going to be SK rotating towards the Dragon, or perhaps recalling and trying to take Dragon on the recall, but their timing is a little bit off if that is their plan. We have the Gnasher's Tooth being picked up on Overpow, which is pretty standard with what we see onto Kayle nowadays, as her Reckoning was nerfed in 4.2 it did get changed from a 1.0 to a 0.6 AP ratio, so it means she can no longer go for those one-hit crazy nuke bursts, and instead has to rely on the damage from her Righteous Fury and her passive, which shreds through targets. And oh man, this turret is so low, and the minions don't actually get it. That is just really painful. But with Freddy rotating down and some action in the bottom lane, Jesset in the mid lane, Jesset's forced to flash away there. Svenskeren engaging onto Jankos. Mega Inferno Bomb goes down. It does a lot of damage. Svenskeren picks up Jankos. Here comes Vander from behind. Freddy engaging. He's joining the team fight while Xaxis is forced to back away. Vander, unfortunately, gets caught out in a Solar Flare. He takes a lot of damage. A huge Blades of Torment catches Vander. He's getting low. Will Vander be able to survive? Candy Panda flashes forward, picks up the kill. And now with Jesset and Svenskeren already engaging onto the dragon, this is now the second dragon going into SK's favor. SK looking like they want to turn a dominant laning phase into a win, and this is something that would really help their rankings in the LCS right now, as they have not been doing as well as I think that they should be. But we'll have to keep an eye on how successful they are as Jesset takes the mid turret. This is now 2 turrets to 0, 2 dragons to 0, 5 kills to 2, and a solid 5,000 gold lead. Well, it is actually still 5,000 gold in favor of SK. Calaver caught a little bit forward by Candy Panda. Candy Panda is just going to walk away from that one. And the laning phase from SK was very strong. I didn't expect such a strong laning phase. It is working out quite effectively, and we can see they are starting to take objectives off of this. They're starting to push and group together. Freddy has completed his Blade of the Ruin King, as we can see Xaxis not opting to finish Blade of the Ruin King on Jax, instead going for a Trinity Force first, which is pretty standard, as Jax does do enormous scaling with his Sheen AD proc, and he can even do well with Phage. Janko's going to catch Freddy out of position. Bloodwell is on Freddy, so he shouldn't have that much of a problem. Let's see if Freddy wants to try to fight, but no, he doesn't have his top turret. Overpow is actually coming around from behind. Dark Flight with a bit of a knock-up. Grand Skyfall being activated as Svenskeren wants to engage. Bloodwell is popped. Mega Inferno Bomb dodged by Overpow. Freddy gets back up, gets cocooned, and immediately falls upon. Svenskeren did cancel his Grand Skyfall. Unfortunately, that wasn't a fight that SK wanted, but it looks like they're coming in now. Here's the Grand Skyfall being reactivated as Jankos is going to be caught out of position. Repel goes down. N-rated, waiting to try to follow up on that. A huge Solar Flare catches Xaxis. Will he be able to flash over the wall? He does make it over, but the Ignite is taking away. Jesset picks up the kill. Jankos looks like he is going to escape for now. So too is Overpow. Overpow did manage to get the recall, and yet another blue invade for SK, but at the cost of their bottom tier 1 turret. Calaver is going to catch up with that, but the action is just continuing to happen. A huge cocoon catches Jesset despite the satchel charge. He gets stunned. A huge repel goes down. Jankos tries to juke out of the way, gets caught by another kill for Jesset. Jesset is just doing really well on Ziggs right now, and we can tell why Ziggs is the flavor of the week in the LCS, as he is doing enormous amounts of damage. That is 203, 216 farm, about 20 minutes in, and what is soon to be a completed Rabadon's death cap after all of those kills. Yes, there is the pickup. That does mean those bouncing bombs are going to be able to one-shot minion waves and really shove away for Jesset's. And really, ROC is on the back foot. This is a bit unexpected to see them having so much trouble. Normally, they do play with a bit more unconventional style with their rotations and their team compositions, but they're just not quite as effective in this game, and it's a bit disappointing to see them fall so far behind. It is about a 5,000 gold lead in favor of SK, and with Jesset's getting blue once again, he's just going to be able to completely shove onto Overpow's Kale. And Overpow's Kale, he's had some good divine interventions, but I haven't been seeing him get into fights and just shred through targets with Righteous Fury. And that's a bit disappointing, as that's what Kale really needs to do on the 4.2 patch. She has to be able to get onto Jesset's and Candy Panda and chunk them away. Even if she is forced to attack Freddy or Svenskeren, she really can do enormous amounts of damage, but so far, Overpow has been playing very conservatively, very defensively, and we can see that he's starting to fall behind because of it. He's about 50, maybe 60 farm behind Jesset's, and that is understandable considering how powerful a laning phase Ziggs has, especially against Kale, which is something I wasn't even terrifically aware of. So that's something I know now. We learn something new every day, as Ziggs is doing very well against Overpow on Kale. And now SK looking to continue shoving up in this mid lane. They want to try to take this tier 2 mid turret. Now the cocoon has been activated. I don't think they will be able to defend it, as the completed Trinity Force Bloodthirster is doing enormous amounts of damage. The culling gets blown out from Candy Panda to force Jankos out of position. He was looking for the repel, didn't quite get it, as the culling forced him back. And with Dragon about to spawn in a minute and a half, this does mean that SK has a solid advantage, as that mid turret gives a lot of map presence to SK. And now that they're rotating towards the bottom, trying to take this tier 2 turret, they could even try to force a fight, as this isn't exactly the best place that they want to be. Calaver forced to dodge the minefield. Let's see if it goes down the hook. Going to miss satchel charge, catches Jankos, but he's defended under his turret, and there isn't going to be a dive quite yet from SK. They're waiting for it, but Freddy doesn't have his blood well, so I expect to see once Freddy land his blood, once his blood well comes off of cooldown, just dive right in. But no, ROC are going to give it up. They don't want to fight, and suddenly the objective control is so securely in SK's favor. They're a 7,000 gold lead advantage, 5 turrets to 2. That early laning phase is just snowballing so very well. I haven't seen a composition like this work out so effectively in a very, very long time. And really, ROC is on the back foot. They're actually making a beeline for the Baron. I'm not so sure that this is such a great idea. This is really a desperate play, but they're all walking on top of wards. ROC has to know that, SK has to know that this Baron is being taken. Yes, there's a lot of damage from Overpow. He can shred through Baron very quickly, as he does have a great Armor MR shred. Grand Skyfall about to be activated. This could be the team fight. Mega Inferno Bomb goes down. Svenskar and catches Jankos. Jankos forced to back away Vander dangerously low, but he goes down. Zazas unfortunately dies. Freddy trying to tank the Baron for his team, relying on that enormous regeneration. Solar Flare catches Jankos. Intervention keeps him alive, but he backs away, and the Baron goes to SK with the counter push. This is huge for SK, as this means that they are now a solid, 9,000 gold ahead. They're going to shove down the mid. They're going to try to take the inhibitor, and I think they just might be able to, as Zazis, the tank for ROC is still dead, and with intervention on cooldown, there's nothing that they can do. Calaver used his True Shot Barrage, so he's not going to be able to clear the minions. The turret falls. They're going to move onto the inhibitor now, and Rated caught in the hook is not even going to care, as SK is in a very dominant position, looking even like they want to rotate towards the bottom. They're going to take a few turret hits, but I don't think they care, as they have the minion wave pressuring forward. That completed Trinity Force on Candy Panda doing so much with the Bloodthirster to chunk down the turret. Freddy really becoming a very effective Aatrox. I'm very surprised in the surrender vote from ROC. They don't even want to play it out. The game goes to SK. Wow, what an amazing game out of SK Gaming. That was completely unexpected. Who knew that a very early laning phase could be used to snowball quick objectives and try to force your opponents out of lane and force team fights and turrets? I am completely just enthralled with SK's playing. They played it so smartly, so patiently. They took their time in lane. They said, we have a stronger top lane, we have a stronger mid lane, and while our early game in the bottom lane is a little bit wonky, once we manage to make it to the mid game, our laning phase is stronger, so we expect to be able to win that, and they did a really great job of doing that. So SK, they definitely had that plan from the beginning. They just did so very, very well, and they also managed to show us why Aatrox can actually thrive in a Season 4 meta. I'd actually like to see Aatrox put up against something like Mundo or Shyvana or even Trundle to see how well he does. I think Trundle would be a good counter to Aatrox, as he does have those low cooldown bite sort of attacks that he can use to chunk his opponent. But yeah, I think that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please share them below the video. And if you'd like to contact me directly, shoot me a tweet at CasterSeta, and I promise I'll respond with a funny picture as quickly as possible. Thanks again for watching, and bye for now.